Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started. Thank you all for being here. My name is Helen Schroeder. I'm the Marketing Project Manager at Sigma, and I will be co-facilitating this webinar today with my colleague Shruti Kumar. For those of you who are new to Sigma, we are a professional services firm that does succession planning, talent development, and psychological assessments for organizations like your own looking to build their internal talent pools. Sigma has been in business for over 50 years. So as a company, we've got a lot of experience and we're excited to be here sharing with you some of what we have learned about how to apply the 9-box for real impact at your organization. A little bit of housekeeping. We have about 60 minutes together today. For the first 45 minutes or so, Shruti will walk you through the webinar content to introduce the 9-box pros, cons, templates for how to use it and what to look out for as you're applying it for talent development processes at your organization. We will be recording this session, so no need to take notes. We will share both a copy of the recording as well as a copy of the slides for your review following the session. We'll also reserve 15 minutes at the end of the webinar for questions, so feel free to post those in the Q&A or in the chat as they come up. I will be monitoring those, and then we'll take some time to go through them with Shruti at the end. And anything that we don't cover in our session today, we'd be happy to continue the conversation via email. But for now, use the chat and the Q&A. That's what it's there for. And do keep an eye on it throughout the webinar. I'll be posting links to tools and templates and helpful blogs or guides along the way as Shruti is talking about some of the templates that you can be using along the way. And now, without any further ado, let me introduce you to our presenter today. Shruti has a master's in industrial organizational psychology from Western University. She's a member of our consulting team, and here she applies her passion and expertise to create evidence-based content on organizational best practices. Shruti largely develops resources and facilitates presentations designed to support leadership development and succession planning efforts for our clients. And through this work, her main goal is to help our clients gain knowledge, feel more confident, and achieve success in the workplace. So you are all in excellent hands. Thank you, Shruti, for being with us today, and I'll pass it off to you now to get started.
Great. Thank you, Helen, for that introduction. So I'm really excited to be talking to you all today about the 9-box grid. So we'll talk a little bit about what this actually looks like, what the benefits and limitations of the traditional 9-box grid are, and then what Sigma brings to the 9-box grid to address those limitations. I'll also walk you through how to populate our grid and provide you with additional tips for talent development. So before we dive into the content, I'd like to learn a little bit about all of you today. So Helen will start a poll for us, and I'd like to know, does your organization use the 9-box grid? So it looks like over 50% of you say yes, your organization does use the 9-box grid. I see some answers trickling in still. A good majority of you don't use the grid, but are interested in using it. So that's great that you're here today. You'll learn all about it. I'll give it a few more seconds in case there's any more responses. But a pretty even split between yes and no. Great, thank you all for sharing. It's really helpful to have this information because then I can try to facilitate the presentation accordingly. But a large majority of you do not use the 9-box grid, so I'll be giving a lot of detail as to how you can use it. All right. So we'll be exploring how the 9-box model can be used specifically in the context of talent development. So let's clarify what a talent development program actually is. So talent development programs refer to a structured approach for identifying and nurturing individual potential. The main goals of talent development are to really help employees build their skills, improve their performance, and make meaningful contributions to the organization and potentially move on to more advanced roles. So these programs typically offer a range of opportunities for learning and growth. So you may see things such as technical trainings, leadership development workshops, or coaching and mentorship opportunities. Now, talent development does require a significant investment of time, resources, and effort. But research consistently shows that this is well worth it. Organizations that invest intentionally in their people often see higher levels of employee engagement, job satisfaction, retention, and overall performance. So, we believe that talent development is a vital process for all organizations. And it's also a very adaptable process. So, it can be tailored to align to your specific goals, the resources that you have available, and the unique makeup of your talent pool. However, given the wide range of tools and approaches that are available, it can definitely feel overwhelming to know where to start. Now, the Nine Box is only one specific tool that you might be considering using within your talent development program. It's a well-known method for categorizing and assessing talent within an organization. And it's often used as a foundation for further development efforts and for things like succession planning. Now, while the traditional nine-box grid does offer several strengths, it also has some limitations. So at Sigma, we've created our own version of this tool, which are designed to address these limitations and really help support a more strategic approach to talent development. So we'll start by looking at the traditional nine-box model, and then we'll walk through how our version differs and how it can add value to your development efforts. So you'll see that this is what a traditional nine-box grid typically looks like. So it's a 3 by 3 matrix, although I've also seen 2 by 2s, that categorizes employees based on two key dimensions. So specifically performance and potential. Now, performance refers to past employee behavior, whereas potential represents their expected future behavior. So how well the employee is likely to perform in more advanced roles. Employees' direct supervisors would assess them as being either low, medium, or high on each of these dimensions. And so where an employee falls on the grid represents their potential, and it helps to guide decisions about their overall development path throughout the organization. So just to give you a brief overview, an employee that falls on the top right corner has high performance as well as high potential. And so they're typically seen as a strong candidate for leadership or more senior roles. However, someone at the bottom left with low performance and low potential might require perhaps closer support, something like a performance improvement plan, or other interventions. Now, the bottom right and the top left are really interesting because the employee is being rated as high on one metric, but as low on the other. So someone in the top left may not have demonstrated strong performance yet, but they're seen as having high potential. Now, this could be due to context. Perhaps this is a new hire or a recent graduate who simply needs additional time or training. It could also be possible that they're in a role that doesn't play to their strengths, and so their potential could actually be better realized somewhere else in the organization. Now, in the bottom right, this is an employee who is a high performer with low upward potential. Now, this is not necessarily a negative. It could simply mean that they're highly effective in their current role, and so they're really well matched to that role. We should remember that not all individuals are interested in promotion. So based on discussions with employees to clarify their expectations, Organizational goals for these types of employees could instead involve supporting their current levels of job satisfaction and maintaining their engagement within their current role. Now, you might have noticed that nine-box models sometimes use slightly different terms for each of these categories, and that's true across many versions. And Sigma's model also includes our own a set of labels, which I will show you shortly. But let's focus on the traditional model for now, and let's dive deeper into performance and potential. So performance is a backwards-looking metric. It reflects an employee's past behaviors and achievements. So this is typically categorized as low, medium, or high. And now if you're thinking about using this traditional nine-box grid, there's a few important questions to consider before using it. So these will help you ensure that the tool is being applied thoughtfully and meaningfully within your organization. So first, what information can you draw upon? Does your organization have perhaps a formal performance measurement system in place? If not, what performance criteria are most relevant for your context? So you can think about things like client satisfaction scores, sales targets, production output, or any other indicators that reflect success within that specific role or organization or industry. You then want to think about how to map those metrics onto the low, medium, and high categories. And this requires a little bit of strategic thinking. So, for example, what actually qualifies high performance within your organization? This could look like perhaps top percent on a certain metric. You also want to think about what a medium score means. So often this might mean that the employee is meeting expectations but not exceeding them. So defining these categories clearly can help to improve consistency and fairness in the evaluation process. Now, you also want to consider how performance actually connects to potential. So performance is about what the employee has done, whereas potential is about what they could do in the future in a more advanced role within that organization. And so understanding how these two relate can help supervisors to have those more informed conversations about development and career planning. Now, potential is a bit different from performance. Performance is backwards looking, whereas potential is forwards looking. So it refers to an employee's latent skills and underlying abilities, so that untapped capacity that they have for future growth. Now, this potential can be developed through training, mentorship, perhaps stretch assignments, or other opportunities. To assess this, it's helpful to ask yourself a few key questions here as well. So how is this employee expected to grow within your organization specifically? What other advanced roles are available for them? Do they show a willingness to learn and take on new challenges? Or do they seem to express comfort with their routine tasks? Have they shown that they're able to apply their knowledge to different projects and tasks? And are there any skills or strengths that they possess that they aren't currently using within their specific role? Now, once you've thought through these questions, the next step is determining how to actually measure and to categorize potential. So just like with performance, this looks like clearly defining what that low, medium, and high potential actually looks like within your specific organizational context. And so this really adds that structure and consistency that you need in your evaluation process. Now, if you're using Sigma's 9-box grid, we do have a system in place that will help you measure these metrics and easily categorize your employees, and I will get to that soon. Now, I'd be curious to know, how does your organization currently measure performance and or potential? So Helen will start a poll for us, and I believe you can select multiple options on this one. And you'll see one of the response options is talent assessments. So for those of you who do use talent assessments, I'd love to know which ones you are seeing that are currently popular. So feel free to let us know in the chat which assessments you're using or which you've used in the past. Sorry, I was just scrolling through the chat to make sure that I didn't miss any responses. All right, so it looks like the majority or the top answer here is performance reviews, which is definitely common. I'm also seeing managerial feedback, 360-degree feedback, which is awesome, but a lower percentage using talent assessments. Okay, really interesting to know. Thank you. All right. Feel free to keep those answers trickling in or use the chat, but I'll move on for now. All right, so just a quick summary of what I've discussed so far. So performance is backwards looking. This reflects how an employee has done in their current role. And so you can measure it through things like productivity, the quality of their work, or a job-specific performance standard. Potential is forward looking, and it really assesses an employee's capacity to grow, take on more responsibilities, and succeed in higher level roles within your organization. So potential often reflects skills or abilities that haven't been fully realized yet or are not being currently used in the existing position. So ultimately, in its traditional form, the 9-box grid does offer several important benefits. It's relatively simple to use, it has immediate and intuitive appeal, and it can be applied across a variety of organizational contexts. So the 9-box helps leaders to assess large talent pools, guide those conversations about employee development, and make informed decisions about next steps in the talent development process. So when it's being used effectively, the 9-box can really save both time and effort. But these benefits are only realized when the tool is being applied thoughtfully and when the metrics that go into it are clearly defined and intentionally chosen. So improper application of the 9-box can lead to unfavorable consequences. And before I discuss what those might look like, I do have another poll for you. So for those who have used the 9-box grid, and I know that's not everyone today, but how would you describe your experience? If you have faced any challenges in using it, please feel free to share in the chat, just keeping it a little bit brief. I'll just keep an eye on the chat to see if any responses are trickling in there. All right, so it looks like for those of you who have used it, most of you are saying it's okay, it does the trick. So hopefully, when we learn more about what Sigma's approach looks like, it might address some of those things that you feel are missing from the 9-box tool. And some of you do love the 9-box, but hopefully we also have some helpful tips for you today. All right, thank you everyone for your responses. I will keep an eye on the chat in case there's anything else trickling in. But let's talk about some of those limitations that I've mentioned. And I think it's actually really important to understand what these limitations are, especially if you're evaluating different versions of this tool. So first, you want to consider the level of detail that's actually going into the grid. So how are those employees being scored on the different metrics? So we want to know if there is a meaningful difference between the low, medium, and high scores. So remember previously I mentioned that a medium could look like meeting expectations, whereas a high score could look like exceeding expectations or some sort of top percentage. Now, the more clarity that you have here in terms of how potential and performance are being defined and how the different categories are distinguished, the more clarity, the more easily leaders can actually determine next steps in the talent development process. And this clarity also facilitates easier communication and greater employee understanding of the 9-box tool. So next, we also want to know whether there is possibility of rater preferences or biases that are actually influencing those ratings. So often when we fail to define the metrics before raters are actually evaluating employees, this can lead to inconsistent benchmarks. So when this is combined with individual preferences or those cognitive biases that may show up, this can then result in subjective or speculative ratings, which we wouldn't advise for making those key organizational decisions. So the more subjective and the more informal the rating process is, the more likely that there is to be bias. So for example, if your process is very informal and no guidelines are provided to raters, different raters may rate employees using different standards. So ultimately, organizations and leaders need to be really intentional about the way that performance and potential are being defined and measured. Now, of course, even when you have a single rater that's assessing different employees, bias is still possible due to familiarity or perhaps even preferential treatment of employees. But in our approach to the 9-box, we really try to tackle this by using clear standards, clear definitions, and objective assessments, which I will elaborate on. And before I touch on these last two limitations, let's just quickly walk through a brief example. So we can consider this hypothetical case study where we have two employees who've been selected to participate in a talent development program in their organization. So the leadership team has decided to use the 9-box grid, but they haven't actually defined the metrics going into it. So when leaders act Janet and Rachel's direct supervisors to rate them on those performance and potential metrics, it ends up being completely up to those supervisors to determine how to evaluate them. So for the sake of this example, let's say that Janet and Rachel are objectively pretty identical in terms of their performance and potential. However, Janet's direct supervisor believes that low ratings are really motivating for employees to go above and beyond. And the supervisor also focuses on a minor recent mishap rather than considering Janet's overall performance in her role. Now, on the other hand, Rachel's direct supervisor considers her general performance and aims to rate Rachel fairly. So Rachel ends up being placed much higher on the grid compared to Janet due to these subjective rating differences. And Janet and Rachel then receive vastly different opportunities for growth and development. And this not only impacts their working experiences, but also their career trajectories. So ultimately, the leadership team should have provided more specific definitions and ideally used standardized assessments, which would have allowed the organization to really maximize the potential of both employees. And of course, you can also imagine how this process would have had a strong impact on Janet's engagement and satisfaction with her work. Now, regarding this third limitation, you want to consider whether there is a clear distinction between performance and potential. It's really easy to have this lack of understanding of what these metrics are and specifically what they mean in your organization. So again, having that intentional thought that goes into the metrics and how they're actually being assessed. The 9-box can be quite simple to use actually, but it doesn't actually do everything for you. And then this last consideration is whether employees could react negatively, especially when they're being identified as low potential. However, if the 9-box grid is based on those intentional metrics and a really clear scoring criteria, this can really help in managing perceptions of fairness because employees understand where these scores are actually coming from and what they actually mean. So again, spending some time being thoughtful before implementing this tool can really help with this and also the other limitations. Now, fortunately for you, our approach to the 9-box means that we've actually done this work for you. However, you might be thinking, given all the considerations and limitations I've mentioned, is the 9-box worth using? So we do believe that it is, but not as a standalone tool. In fact, we have specific recommendations on how you can improve the 9-box by using it alongside objective and standardized metrics. This ensures that your talent development process is intentional and effective. And it really supports your employees by assessing them accurately and matching them with opportunities for skill development. So in our approach, we use our evidence-based competency framework, as well as standardized definitions of the metrics to populate the 9-box grid. So this increases objectivity and supports a more robust talent development process overall. So by clearly defining those metrics, leaders can feel confident in the decisions that they're making for allocating resources and opportunities. And they're also better equipped to communicate this process to employees. When employees understand how the tool works and that it's being used in a standardized fashion, they tend to respond more favorably to it. Now, another major difference in our approach is that we rank employees based on two separate metrics of potential. So instead of performance and potential, we use leader-based potential and assessment-based potential. So ultimately, talent development programs are about nurturing potential into growth. And we really wanted to capture that potential element from multiple angles. I want to assure you that we don't completely ignore performance, as it does play a key role in informing that leader-based potential metric. So we're still addressing the performance element. But overall, this allows us to really be able to use data from both employees using a self-assessment as well as from leaders, both of which are really important. So measuring potential from these different perspectives can really help to ensure that development opportunities are being allocated fairly and really maximize your employees' potential. All right, so this is what our 9-box template looks like. So as I mentioned, this is based on that leader-rated potential and assessment-rated potential. Now, leader-rated potential is measured by the talent review survey, and this is completed by the employee's leader. Assessment-based potential is measured by the leadership skills profile, which is completed by the employee themselves. Now, based on their scores, employees are then grouped into one of these 9 categories, representing their overall potential. Now, you'll notice that some category labels are used more than once, and I'll cover what these categories mean in more depth later. But for now, I'll briefly mention that the categories include top potential, high potential, moderate potential, as well as unverified, hidden, uncertain, and low potential. Now, you might also notice at the very bottom right, we have a red dot, which represents a flight risk. So essentially, leaders can actually identify employees who might be at risk of leaving the organization. Now, there are many reasons why this might be the case, and it's especially worrisome when you have those high potential employees who want to leave because they're not feeling challenged and not seeing opportunities for growth. But this information is useful regardless of where an employee is placed on the grid, especially for helping you plan future staffing needs. All right, so I previously mentioned that the traditional 9-box is user-friendly. It provides a straightforward visual of employee potential. And so our version of the 9-box grid has these features as well, but it also includes some additional benefits. So for example, raters receive clear guidelines for evaluating employees, and we use assessments and standardized definitions to enhance objectivity. We also include employees in the process as active participants who complete a self-assessment, and this can really help to improve perceptions of fairness. Now, once ratings have been completed, we also provide step-by-step instructions for simple categorization on the grid. And so ultimately, our clear process for defining these metrics and constructing the grid really promotes organizational transparency and allows your leaders to make effective decisions. So I'll walk you through the how to actually populate the grid. But first, I'd like to ask one last poll question. So what challenges does your organization face when implementing strategic plans, such as talent development initiatives? And I believe that you can also select multiple responses for this one. And if you have anything that's not mentioned in the poll, please feel free to share on the chat. I'm seeing some previous comments that there's a tendency to over rely on the 9 box. And so really seeing it as a static tool, which we definitely don't recommend, it should be a conversation starter. Yeah, exactly how you've put it, Carol. All right, so it looks like one of the greatest challenges, with almost half the respondents, are saying that there's no structured approach. And yeah, this can be a very big disadvantage with the traditional 9 box tool. So let's walk through how we add structure to this process. All right. So there are 3 main steps in our structured approach. Now, the first is to consider your talent pool. So part of this is to meet first with the leadership team and to discuss the purpose and value of the talent development process so that you can actually gain leader buy-in right from the start. Once leaders are on board, you can determine the employees who are eligible for talent development. The next step is to complete the assessments. So you would email both employees as well as their direct supervisors to explain the process and to have them complete the relevant assessments. The final step is to populate the grid using the assessment scores and the scoring bands that we provide. Now, it's important to recognize that the talent development process doesn't stop once employees are categorized on the 9 box. It should actually be a starting point to drive meaningful conversations and intentional decisions about development opportunities and advancement in the organization. Now, there are many ways to develop talent, but it's important that leaders carefully consider the resources and supports that they're going to offer employees. So let's touch on the assessments. So assessment rated potential is one of the data sources that we use to populate the grid. And this is measured by the Leadership Skills Profile Revised, or the LSPR report. So this is self-rated by employees. Now, the LSPR is an evidence-based measure of Sigma's leadership competency framework, and it provides personality-based ratings of potential. So the assessment doesn't actually measure performance, and any low scores don't really reflect a lack of skill, but simply that a given competency may not come as naturally to that individual. So by using the LSPR, we are adding objectivity to this assessment of potential. And we also directly engage employees by having them complete the assessment. Now, before we move on to leader-rated potential, I just wanted to give you a bit more information about the LSPR. So this is actually a really handy tool for employees, even within the broader context of talent development, because it helps individuals to gain awareness about both their strengths as well as their developmental areas. So after completing the assessment, employees receive an LSPR focus report, which guides them in creating personalized development plans based on their individual results. So to give you a little bit more insight, this is a sample of the snapshot, which represents an individual's results in descending order from their strengths to their development opportunities. So at the top, you would see competencies which are more likely to be individual strengths based on their personality. And then at the bottom, these are those competencies that are more likely to be growth areas that do require longer term development. And that middle blue area that you've seen, or the My Zone, these include competencies that could become strengths based on more short-term development. And each of these competencies is also described in further detail beyond this single snapshot as well. Now, I mentioned that employees can also guide their own self-development, and they also receive these easy-to-use templates to do that. So one of the templates involves comparing their growth areas against other feedback that they've received in order to determine their top development priorities. Another template helps employees to further narrow this down by evaluating competency relevance as well as the resources that they have available. Individuals can then use a template to make a plan of action, which involves creating specific and detailed actions and routines to develop that top competency. And then they can also reflect on their growth. So I want to emphasize that our team of experts has put in years of rigorous development and validation into creating this assessment. And we truly believe that it's a powerful tool that can support your talent development needs. I would highly encourage you to check this out, and we are currently offering a free trial to take the LSPR, so you can see it firsthand. So you'll be able to take the test online and access the full assessment. So you'll see that full focus report, including your personalized results, those competency definitions, and those development activities that I showed you. All right, so zooming back out, let's move on to that other metric that goes into our 9-box. So this is based on leader ratings of employee potential, and it's measured by the talent review survey and completed by the employee's direct supervisor. So this covers 6 different dimensions of employee behaviors and abilities, and each dimension includes a specific definition and is assessed by a defined rating scale. So here's a cropped version of the form, so you can see exactly what this looks like. So on the left, leaders can list all the employees that they're evaluating, if they're evaluating more than one. And they would then rate them on 6 different dimensions of potential. Now you'll see that the first dimension here is actually performance. And many of the other dimensions are also important for or related to performance. So we are still capturing that more backwards looking performance element that would go into the traditional 9-box grid. Now with each of these dimensions, any employee who is meeting expectations would be rated around a 3, which is the scale midpoint. And so those 4s and 5s are reserved for employees who are really exceeding performance expectations or are seen as exceptional. So leaders would first rate the employee on whether they show strong performance in their role in general. Next, they would focus in on whether the employee shows strong initiative. So do they take advantage of opportunities to lead and develop? So as an example, an employee who frequently requests and enjoys taking on stretch assignments might be rated on the higher end of the scale. The third dimension is feedback, which includes openness to feedback, as well as actually growing and developing based on this feedback. So an employee who often becomes defensive or doesn't grow based on feedback would be rated lower on this dimension. Next is strategic alignment, which reflects supporting the company's mission and vision. The fifth dimension is relationships, so whether the employee is well respected by supervisors, peers, and direct reports. And the final dimension here is motivation. So whether the employee is actually interested in being in a more senior role. And ultimately, these overall add up to the leader rated potential score. Just gonna pop over to the chat to make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, so this brings us to that third step in the overall process, which is to actually populate the grid and to visualize employee potential. So to do this, you would take the scores on the LSPR and the talent review survey. So the LSPR would be the overall score and the talent review survey would be an average score. And you would use these scoring bands to categorize employees on the grid. So we can consider this example to understand how to use those scoring bands. So we have Reggie here, who's a hypothetical employee who's received a high score on the LSPR, but a low score on the talent review survey. So this means that Reggie is categorized as hidden potential. Now, there are many reasons why an employee could be placed in this category. So it's possible that Reggie lacks the experience that he actually needs to succeed because he's a recent graduate or a new hire. So in cases like this, your next steps would involve clarifying expectations, possibly providing more training and giving them time to improve. Now, if that's not the case, it could actually be that the current role is not a good fit for your employee, meaning that they actually have untapped potential. So your next step would involve a candid discussion with the employee about what's missing for them in their role. Now, I also mentioned that you can identify flight risks on the 9-box. So in this example, Reggie's leader knows that Reggie is not happy in his current role. Now, considering that full context and having those candid discussions with employees can help you to ensure that you're not losing out on potential talent who may just need a little bit more support than what's currently being offered. We can also discuss next steps for some of these other categories. Now, larger organizations would likely have even more employees than what you're seeing here. And you would also see employees who may be in the same category, but we're just keeping it simple for the purpose of this presentation. So we've already discussed Reggie and what that hidden potential might mean. You could also have employees like Penny, who have been placed in the low or the uncertain potential categories. So these are employees who require further attention and observation. And so I would recommend working collaboratively with them to identify developmental roadblocks and create a plan of action before considering other interventions after some time has passed. Now, for employees like Sam, at the bottom right there, who have unverified potential, this means that they have high leader rated potential below assessment rated potential. For these employees, you could consider whether they actually might be very well suited to their current role rather than candidates for advancement. So in this case, you'd want to aim to keep them engaged within their current role. Now, employees like Brock in the middle there, who are categorized as moderate potential, are likely very well suited for talent development efforts. And if these employees are in fact interested in upward mobility, they can help to fill those more senior positions that are being left vacant by other employees who are also moving up. So on that note, those high potential and top potential employees, such as Yasmin, have been highly rated on both metrics of potential. So you definitely want to check in with these employees to ensure that they're interested in stepping up into higher positions. Now, of course, I do want to note that your next steps also depend on your organization's size, the specific goals that you have, and other factors. So, for example, if resources are limited, you might decide to prioritize development efforts to those high and top potential employees and provide them with those opportunities for training, coaching, and mentorship. But keep in mind that the ultimate goal is to be intentional and strategic. So you also want to think about what trickle-down effects will happen when you have a higher placed an individual in a more leader in a more senior role moving on up. So whether you can bring more junior candidates up as well. All right, so to sum it all up, you will need to complete the talent review survey, which provides those leader-rated potential results, and have employees complete the LSPR to provide the assessment-rated potential. And with these two assessments, you can use the scoring bands that we provide to populate the 9-box grid. Now, if you would like a step-by-step guide on how to use the 9-box grid for talent development, you can download our High Potential Talent Development Guide. I would like to give you a few more tips before we wrap up here. So there are a few different things to keep in mind to really ensure that your 9-box grid is supporting a robust talent development process. So in terms of those leader ratings of potential, employees should be evaluated by supervisors with whom they've directly worked with. So remember, employees are being rated on their general performance, their initiative, their response to feedback, strategic alignment with the organization, relationship with others, and motivation for advancement. So a supervisor who doesn't actually work directly with an employee wouldn't be able to accurately assess these dimensions. And this could result in incorrect categorization on the grid or even low differentiation between candidate scores overall, which really makes it difficult to consider your next steps. Of course, you also want to double check your scores, especially because populating the grid is only one step in the broader talent development process. So where an employee is placed on the grid actually impacts their resources and opportunities that they receive, and it further impacts their working experiences. So things like engagement, satisfaction, and productivity, which I mentioned. So avoiding those minor errors early on in the process can help you to prevent you. Sorry, avoiding minor errors can help support you in maximizing your employee potential later on down the line. Now, I also want to emphasize once more that while the 9-box paints a picture, it doesn't tell you the full story. So you really need continuous and transparent communication with your employees to not only keep them informed, but to also understand their perspectives. So establish early objectives and consistently check in with employees. And regularly revisiting the 9-box can also help to ensure accountability and alignment with development goals. Now, equally important is making sure that employees feel supported throughout the process. So aiming to actively foster a culture that promotes employee growth and development. Now, of course, this will look differently based on your organization's needs and resources, but it could mean structuring intentional opportunities, such as protected weekly time for learning, perhaps monthly coaching or mentorship sessions, or even quarterly or yearly skill building workshops. All right, so we're just about ready for the Q&A here, but we'll just do a little recap. So the 9-box offers a valuable bird's eye view of your organization's talent distribution. It can also help to highlight those vulnerabilities, such as your potential flight risks, and assist you in strategically planning future staffing needs. Overall, the 9-box can also spark conversations with stakeholders, inform resource allocation, and help you to better support your employees. And with that, I'll hand it over to Helen to facilitate the Q&A portion.
Thank you very much, Shruti. So we do have a little bit of time now to address any questions that you may have. Feel free to pop those in the chat or use the Q&A. I'll toggle between both. In the meantime, we'll start with a few common questions that we've seen from past webinars and interactions with clients. And if that sparks any questions that you have, we definitely do want to prioritize those. So please don't be shy. The first question that we'll start off with is, what are some practical ways to provide employees with professional development opportunities? So you talked about the 9-box not being an end in and of itself, how would you go from there to then provide some of those moderate or high potential employees with the tools that they need to continue progressing?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I would really emphasize that this depends on your company's budget and the resources that you actually have available to support your candidates for talent development. So you want to make sure that your initiative overall is realistic and also sustainable. But some practical strategies might include things like job shadowing. So, where you have someone shadow an employee in a more senior role to see to experience a realistic preview of that role and the responsibilities involved. You can also have mentorship or coaching. So, with coaching, you're helping employees to build self awareness of their strengths and their development areas. You can also do things like self-directed learning programs or things like group trainings where you're actually supporting multiple candidates simultaneously and offering specific sessions to help target general developmental gaps in your organization. But those are just a few different strategies. And again, you really want to come back to and think intentionally about your budget, your resources, and your needs.
Thank you, Shruti. That's great. I'll drop 2 more links in the chat for you there in case anyone is interested in taking that next step in development efforts. Sigma does offer competency-based coaching and group workshops, those leadership development workshops. So if you do want support there, our consultants are happy to put together a program for you as well. Okay, next question. How can we improve employee perceptions of the 9-box grid?
Yeah, this is a great question. So one of the ways that we do this is by actually getting employees involved in the process. So having them complete those self-assessments and getting that LSPR focus report so they feel a sense of accountability and build that self-awareness as to their strengths and development areas. Another aspect that we include that we would highly recommend is having a standardized approach. So really being clear on the metrics going into the grid and making sure that it's standardized across supervisors who are rating different employees. And this can really help to facilitate that transparency, which is linked to employee perceptions of fairness.
Great, thank you. Okay, here's a good one. Why might there be a mismatch between the different evaluations of potential, so leader and assessment rated potential?
Yeah. I emphasize that there are different areas on the grid where there is a surprising mismatch, right, between leader rated and assessment rated potential. And understanding the full context can really help you to pinpoint why that might be. So I talked about perhaps you have an employee who's a recent graduate or just a new hire in your organization. So someone like that may have higher assessment rated potential, but lower leader rated potential simply because the leader hasn't had enough time to observe the employee or the employee hasn't had enough time to become comfortable and confident in the organization. You also have employees who may be rated highly in terms of leader rated potential, but lower on assessment rated potential. And those are the types of employees where they actually might be really happy and satisfied where they are. So having those candid conversations with employees to understand whether they're actually interested in promotion is also really useful.
Thank you. Okay. We've got a question here in the chat. I'll just address this. So unfortunately, the 9-box at the moment is only available in English. But if you are interested in translations of any of our materials, please send us an email. We do have some translation capacity and might be able to work with you depending on what the organization's needs are. Okay, and we'll finish with, how do you decide if an employee is a flight risk?
Yeah, good question. And this is a helpful feature in our tool because it helps you pinpoint those employees who might want to leave the organization, and it really helps you to think strategically about your long-term talent pool and your staffing needs. But this could be based on information that you already know about the employee as a direct supervisor, perhaps. Or perhaps there's an opportunity for a transparent conversation. And we do actually recommend in the talent development process to build in those opportunities to talk about employees' satisfaction in their role and their general interest in talent development overall. But yeah, just having those kind of conversations and using a little bit of supervisor judgment where possible.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, before we close, I need to share one more poll for those of you who are here for professional development credits, particularly if you're here for the SHRM PDC. I'll need to know so that I can get a certificate of completion made for you, and we will email that to you following the webinar. So just let me know if you're here for SHRM or ATP. For ATP, you should be able to submit whatever is required for your credits on your own. And for SHRM, I'll get you the activity ID and the certificate of completion emailed this afternoon or tomorrow. And then the last thing I'll mention is that we do have a few other webinars running this year. So feel free to go check out the events tab on our website. We have a variety of succession planning and talent development sessions that you can sign up for. And if you have any feedback that you'd like to share with us, we do review every session and we make adjustments because we really want these to be practical for you. So if you have a moment, let us know what you thought, what you liked, what you didn't like, and we will continue to refine our content accordingly. Okay. Yes, to that question in the chat, we will send a copy of the slides to everyone as well as a recording of the webinar. So keep an eye on your inbox for that. And if there are any questions that we haven't addressed yet, we'll follow up via email. Feel free to also send us an email. If you have any questions as you're going through the slides or the recording, we'd be happy to support you as you're implementing these tools at your organization. And yes, I'll echo what everyone is saying in the chat. Thank you very much, Shruti. It was a pleasure having you with us today, and we hope you all have a lovely rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.